Hey guys, this week we're going to be talking about chapter 19, which is communities and ecosystems. We'll then talk about chapter 18 and then talk about chapter 20. So you're going to have hopefully one video for chapter 19, one video for chapter 18, and two for chapter 20. So 4 videos this week. And if you notice the video like cut out and then just start again, that's because I'm pausing my recording every now and then because I feel horrible. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I feel so bad. Gonna tell you a little bit about what's happening and then we are gonna get started. So y'all know I'm pregnant, wading my way through the treacherous first trimester. And, once the placenta takes over, basically mom's body starts, rapidly increasing her blood volume. And so your blood volume of the mother is going to increase anywhere from 30 to 50%. That's through the duration of your pregnancy, but a lot of it happens really early on as you're supplying the nutrients to the baby through the placenta. So oh my gosh, I can literally feel like it's happening because my blood pressure is so high and it is making me so dizzy. I am so dizzy I could just die. So if it pauses and it just cuts out and then restarts, then that's me. And I'm just getting my life together. So thank you for your patience while I'm growing a human. I am going to share my screen. We are 10 weeks today. We are 10 weeks today. Can you even believe it? I can't. We're almost out of the first trimester. I've been vomiting my freaking brains out. All right. Little terrorist inside me. All right, guys. So chapter 19, we're going to be talking about communities and ecosystems. Going to talk all about terrestrial and aquatic biomes. Going to talk about species diversity in different communities. We're going to talk about different ways that species can interact with each other, all sorts of stuff. This is going to be a little bit longer than most of our videos because I'm trying to put one chapter in one video. All right, guys, so we already went through this at the very beginning of the semester. Oh my gosh. Will you get through it, Eden? Will you? Hold on. Will you? Let's just see. Hold on. Sorry, I'm like looking. Did that do anything? Probably not. Oh, okay. All right, I got it. I understand now how I'm going to stop the recording if I need to. So this is good. All right, guys, at the beginning of the semester, so sorry as I get my life together, we talked about your different cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organism. Now, different organisms, single living individual, if you get a bunch of single living individuals of the same species coming together, that's going to make up a population. So multiple acacia trees, that's going to be a population of acacia trees. Next, you group together lots of different populations of different species, and that's going to be a community. Now, remember, species don't just include animals. Plants are species too. Insects are species too. Okay, all of the living populations are going to come together to form communities. So for instance, all populations in an African savanna, for instance. Then you get all the communities together plus your non-living components of your area. So the living and the non-living, the abiotic and the biotic factors of an environment, and that is going to be your ecosystem. So the entire savanna, the temperature, the climate, the precipitation, all of that stuff, the salinity, the soil nutrients, all of that goes into creating an ecosystem. And then the many, many, many different types of ecosystems are going to come together to create our biosphere, which is the global ecosystems of our planet. All right, guys, so in this chapter, we're going to be talking about communities and ecosystems, specifically communities that live in specific ecosystems, specific biomes. All right. So what's important to know is that when a species lives somewhere, it lives in a particular habitat, okay? And it has physical characteristics of the space that it lives in. Think about your dorm room, your home, your apartment, your whatever, has specific characteristics that are different from somebody else's home. All right, different than the place where somebody else lives, or different than the place where you used to live, right? Now, your niche is going to include all of the resources required for survival, growth, and reproduction. So for instance, this fish, it's not just physically where in a lake it lives, it is all of the nutrients that it needs to survive. It's what it eats. It is it's predators, it's the kelp that is hiding it, okay? It's protection, it's home, okay? So the niche is made up of the physical space and includes other organisms as well as abiotic components of the space. So living and non-living components of a habitat are going to make up your niche. And if you think about that, that makes sense, because in your home, in your physical space, are you only affected by the other people who live there? No, you require a lot of other things that are not living in order to keep you living there, right? Like resources, like water, for instance. You require water. Luckily, that comes directly to your house. And what else? Think of other non-living things that you benefit from in your habitat that's going to make up this niche. All right, so Earth's climate is diverse. The spherical shape is going to mean that sunlight intensity is going to differ at different longitudes of Earth, okay? So here is the sun, and sun's rays are going to differently strike Earth based on your different longitudes, okay? So somewhere like here, it is going to hit right in the middle, right through that equator is going to hit directly, more direct sun rays, as opposed to at the poles, it's going to be more of an indirect pass by. It's going to be less intense sunlight. Now we're going to talk about light and temperature and how they are going to affect your precipitation patterns. Cause variation in precipitation via air circulation patterns. So here are your different convection cells. Now, towards the equator, what's going to happen is that you're going to have things like rainforests. It's a tropical climate. And so at this tropical climate around the equator, you're going to have this air rising up. What kind of air do you think is in rainforests and is tropical? Warm air or hot air? It's warm air. So it's rising up. And as it rises up in these convection cells, what's going to happen is that as it's moving through, getting higher and higher and higher, okay, in the sky, it's going to cool down. And when it cools down, it's going to drop back to the ground, okay? So as the air first cools, it causes water to condense, and it's going to fall as rain. So you have taken up this warm air. It has come up, okay, into the atmosphere. It has cooled down, condenses, just like when you have a drink, okay? Oh, fuck. You have a drink and, oh no, hold on. You have a drink and it's condensing everywhere, right? That's because you had this, okay, you have the temperature on the inside that's different than the temperature on the outside, okay? So it is going to fall as rain. The dry air moves towards the poles and absorbs land moisture. So when you're up here and the rain falls, what's gonna happen is that, once again, you're gonna try to pick up this dry air. So if you think about these convection cells, if you look at this, you have this warm environment, and then drier environment, right? And then drier environment. So we're sort of alternating. Hold on, it says my internet connection is unstable, sorry. you're alternating more or less a rainforest and a desert, but just in general, you're going to have differing precipitation patterns as you're moving through these different longitudes. Air continues to move here. Okay, so it picks it up, these temperate temperatures, it picks it up. And then once again, as it is rising in the sky, it is going to condense, cool down, condense. Air that makes it to the poles, but precipitation at those longitudes. So now we're going to get into our biomes. And what's important is that you have two major classes of these different biomes, okay? Terrestrial biomes, so on land, and then aquatic biomes, which are in water, and different types of water too, which we will talk about, because a marine biome, like the ocean, is much different freshwater. All right, biomes. So if you, we'll talk about this, but a lot of the temperature, a lot of the precipitation stuff is going to affect what can grow there. Live there is going to also, right? So your primary producers are going to seriously affect what kinds of consumers you can have in that particular biome. So different abiotic factors that are going to be really going to be temperature, moisture, nutrients, not only nutrients from the living parts of this biome, the biotic factors in this biome, but also nutrients like in the soil, nutrients like amount of sunlight, nutrients like all sorts of stuff. In some cases, other things that are important are salinity, such as rivers versus marine biomes. So some species, especially some plant species, are going to thrive when every like 10 to 20-ish years, there's a massive fire, okay? And that's because they really rely on these massive disturbances that fires cause in order to germinate. That's really interesting. And in places where it relies on disturbance, you'll see that they have lots of younger plants, tons of grasses and things like that. But also in places like Wyoming, you have forests of trees, but what will happen is that the seeds from those trees require fire to germinate. Huge fires, the new seedlings as well. So that is super interesting. You're getting energy from the nutrients in soil, the nutrients in from sunlight, things like that. Okay, so guys, here is just a diagram based on the distribution of your terrestrial biomes based on annual precipitation, whether you have really high precipitation or really lower precipitation versus temperature. So really, really hot, cold, okay? And then also what's in here is fire disturbances. Which of these biomes rely on fire disturbances? Okay, so we're gonna go through each of these, but if you were looking at which biome has the coldest average temperature and the lowest annual precipitation. So the coldest average temperature and the lowest annual precipitation, you're gonna be looking at polar ice caps, okay? Versus if you have a warm average temperature and super, super high annual precipitation that's more like a tropical rainforest. Really hot and really low annual precipitation, you have deserts, but what I want you to see here is that a desert, even though we think of them being really hot and really dry, that's not actually completely the case, because in a lot of deserts, you can see temperatures dipping down to below freezing at night. You can see tons of just super, super harsh environments in deserts. Precipitation and predominant vegetation. So coniferous forests, for instance, you're going to have a ton of conifers in that particular biome. Polar ice, what do you think you have there? Well, at the poles, you have a lot of ice caps. Tropical forests, it's going to be a tropical climate, and then it's going to have this rainforest due to all the precipitation. Temperate grassland, well, it's not too filled with grass. So here you have the Sahara Desert in Africa, and here you have the Gobi Desert in Asia. And what I want you to notice is that they're along the same longitude of similar biomes coming up again and again and again, right? So you have a desert here, you've got a desert here, 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 okay? But most of them are going to be along that, that same longitude, okay? Similarly, if we're looking at, let's say, coniferous forests, we have a ton of coniferous forests up here in, so this doesn't show that it's really North America, but all over Canada, all over Russia, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go through your different temperature is super, super cold. As you can see, it's in the North Pole and the South Pole where you have this polar ice cap. You've got phytoplankton in organisms. Major organisms that you'll find at the North Pole are polar bears, seals, whales, and birds. Down at the South Pole, over here in Antarctica, you'll find lots of penguins, seals, whales, and squids. So some of these are some, but some are not. Like, are you going to have very many birds visiting Antarctica? Certainly not as many as for instance. And if we're looking at annual temperatures, and then the annual precipitation is very low. Your tundra, which is over here, so still very cold and still not very wet. The subsoil, this layer underneath the soil, it is, you could not dig under it. It is permanently frozen soil. Small plants with shallow roots, that's because of the permafrost, and then animals with really thick fur. So if we think of central Alaska, lots of places, look up here, here. Do you have any tundra elsewhere? No, you don't. Okay, so these northern regions. Now, major organisms that you'll find, the North Pole up here, caribou, lemmings, hares, foxes, wolverines, migratory birds are going to nest and raise their young here, but most are not going to stay for their entire lives. Well, because they're migratory, that makes sense. There is less animal diversity down in the South Pole, down at Antarctica. All right, your taiga, which is over here, so slightly warmer, average temperature, still cold, still really cold, warmer though than the tundra and the polar ice caps. And is going to be annual rainfall than the tundra and the ice caps. So this is the largest terrestrial biome on Earth. Up here, this dark blue, okay, over in these sort of middle longitudes, no. So cold, relatively dry, abundant coniferous trees. Some mammals and birds are going to stay year round. Terrestrial biome on Earth. Resident animals, they have shares, bears, lynx, wolves, wolverines. All right, now we are at the temperate rainforest. Rainforest is here. Okay, so you have these mild winters and cool summers. Okay, so it's not too hot, not too cold. It gets hot and it gets cold, but it's certainly not as cold as the taiga, the tundra, or the polar ice caps. So you get lots of rain, large conifers, amphibians, mammals, and fish. So this is going to be like Pacific Northwest over in got lots of mosses, mosses, ferns, lichen cover every surface. That's because of the cooler climate. Well, I guess it's a cool climate, but it's also warmer than we've been talking about. You know what I'm saying. Also, this abundant rainfall is going to mean that lichen, mosses all over the place. Owls, black bears, cougars, and they're going to prey on smaller. All right, now we're at temperate deciduous forest. This is this whole middle area. Okay, so you get not as much precipitation as the temperate rainforest. Okay, and by the way, the temperate rainforest here, that makes sense about the Pacific Northwest because what's the rainiest place in the entire country? Frickin' Seattle, Washington. Okay, so temperate forest, temperate deciduous forest, you're gonna get less rain, but it's still that temperate climate. So warms are very common. And this is a lot like in the northeastern United States. Here of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, in different types of trees, really, really, really beautiful trees, oak, hickory, maple trees are going to have all these beautiful, beautiful colors. Lots of shrubs, small plants, seed and nut eating mice, birds, squirrels, and deer, red foxes, snakes are predators. So as you can see, we're getting really, really, really different organisms that are living and frankly, the longitude compared to the temperate deciduous forest, which is right here, those longitudes are not very different. And if we compare the freaking caribou that you're seeing and moose that you're seeing in the taiga compared to the foxes and squirrels that you're seeing in a temperate deciduous forest, it's really crazy how much annual temperature, annual precipitation can affect these different So now you have occasional fires that is really going to reinvigorate the soil. It's going to add a ton of nutrients to the soil, and it's just going to make sure that you have this nutrient cycling, that these grasses grow, and then a fire comes, wipes them out, new grasses grow in their place, just again and again and again. Summertime drought, occasional fires, grazing, and you have temperature really, really cold, okay? And again, you have that fire disturbance. So this is places like the central United States, like South Dakota, think of like lots of the Midwestern states, Kansas, Nebraska, these are going to be temperate grasslands. Okay, so you get bison, elk, antelope, prairie mice are small. Next, and also called the chaparral. Now here for our Mediterranean shrubland, right here is our Mediterranean shrubland, really warm environment, really low annual precipitation. That makes sense because part of is this Mediterranean shrubland. Look at that. And then over here, super small area, but known for hot, dry summers, cool, moist winters, fire and drought resistant plants. Love it there. You've got lots of different organisms. Plants. Now you've got deserts. Okay. They're always dry, but as you can see in this diagram, they really hot, or they can be really, really, most animals are going to be active at night. This is a photo from Arizona. Little standing water animals get water from their food. Jackrabbits, kangaroo rats, you're going to eat seeds and leaves. You're going to try to break into cacti for their water supplies, et cetera, et cetera. Snakes and cougars are predators. Now, tropical savanna. It's here, this like orangish, like burnt orange color. Again, you have the fire sign for the fire disturbances. It's going to be warm year round, wet and dry. Trees or shrubs hurting animals. Perennial grasses, patches of fire, drought resistant shrubs and trees because again, there's not too much rainfall. In African tropical savannas, you've got things like zebras, giraffes, lions, cheetahs, etc. And then in Australian, right here, tropical savannas, you have kangaroos, birds. Next, in tropical rainforests, really hot, really wet environment. Highest species diversity of all of the biomes. Highest species diversity of all of the biomes. Tons of arthropods, which if you remember is the most species diverse of all of the animal phyla, arthropoda. Tons of fish. Reptiles, tons of mammals. Now we're going to talk for just a few minutes about aquatic biomes. Now, this is our largest part of the biosphere, making up about 75% of Earth's surface, determined by salinity and other physical factors, meaning that there are lots of different aquatic biomes, and they're separated by physical factors like whether they're standing water or moving. Salinity as well. We're going to talk about these. So you've got biomes, things like lakes, ponds, rivers, and then you have marine biomes and different habitats in these marine biomes, whether they're estuaries or coral reefs or intertidal zones or the pelagic region, which is just this open water. All right, so your freshwater biomes, 1% of Earth, point fresh water in Earth is actually in this usable form, like in lakes and rivers and things like that. So you can have either standing bodies of water or water flowing in one direction. You've got low salinity because it's fresh water, it's not salt water. All right, and they harbor about 6% of all described species. So you do have pretty significant they're super sensitive to the water in these freshwater biomes. So for instance, with pollution or with pH of the water will affect the species. Used for sanitation and industry. Now, lakes and rivers, though, they only hold 0.3% of Earth's fresh water supply. The rest is in polar ice caps or in groundwater. So here you have streams, ponds, and rivers, and then you also have lakes. So for lakes and ponds, you have these standing bodies of water. Where you have water flowing in one direction. To all original life on the planet, cover 70% of Earth's surface and 97% of the planet's water. So when salt concentration is around 3%, when you have those convection cells picking up water and then moving it around the convection cell, cooling it down and dropping it, most of that rainfall is coming from these marine biomes. Photosynthesis by marine algae. Marine biomes, they're diverse. We're going to talk about your different types. So here is your open ocean or your pelagic region, your intertidal zone, your coral reef, and then your estuary. And we're going to talk about each one of these. But what's important is that these are very different. Even in one little, like if you're looking at this diagram, you have very different aquatic biome, okay? So you have this intertidal zone, okay, right here, your intertidal zone where you're gonna have water that is coming and going. You have your photic region where light is easily able to penetrate. You're gonna have a ton of species diversity in this open ocean area in this photic zone where you're getting a ton of light. Then you go into this twilight zone. It's much deeper. You're gonna have way different organisms here. Twilight is meaning that you have much less light that is able to penetrate these like layers of the ocean. Then you go into what's called the benthic realm, okay? So the benthic realm, actually, look, benthic goes from the continental shelf down to the bottom. So it includes your twilight zone. Down here, this is what's called your aphotic zone, okay? Where you have no light whatsoever. You went from the twilight zone down to having no light whatsoever. So you're going to have very, very 1,000 meters down in the ocean compared to between 200 and 1,000 meters, for instance. So your intertidal zone, high tide, very, very different organisms are going to be there. They're going to be doing different things than when you're at low tide. Coral reefs, you've got the photic zone, so lots of photosynthetic organisms, lots of primary producers, super diverse animal life. Estuaries, this is where rivers meet the ocean, okay? So fresh water is meeting salt water at are super productive from nearly that of fresh water to that of the ocean. It's going to vary quite a bit. One of the most biologically productive environments on Earth. It's amazing. But they are very, very, very sensitive to pollution, to altered freshwater inflow, to non-native species. All right, guys. So speaking of the species that in these different aquatic biomes or species interactions within communities, because sometimes you can have something like competition. You know what competition is. Does either organism benefit from competition? No, no, you don't benefit. You lose energy, but you might acquire a resource, or you lose energy and you don't acquire a resource. But either way, there are going to be negative effects on both of the organisms in competition. So there are lots of different interactions about competition where you've got this negative interaction. Species obtain the same limited resource, whether that is shelter, food, water, light, okay? In a second, actually. Invasive species can hugely affect competition and the availability of resources to species that typically survive there. So here is a competitive exclusion principle, which is really relevant with invasive species. So here you've got zebra mussels, of zebra mussels that is on are out competing this organism for all of its resources. It's there, it's going to feed off of what it it's going to steal its resources before space, et cetera, et cetera. So two species cannot coexist indefinitely in the same niche, okay? So eating the same things, living in the same place, using the same shelter, for instance. Eventually one species must win out over the other. Now, the competitive exclusion principle is not necessarily what's called resource partitioning. Different species, two or more species, agreeing to partition these resources, to so that all of the species they need. So multiple species use the same resources in a different way or different time. So here you've got these islands off of Antarctica. Hold on. And they are in different colors, and you can see these different colors of penguins, especially if you're looking orange, they're overlapped, they're feeding more or less at different times because they feed in the same area, okay? As opposed to this red population and this orange population, they can have these overlapping times because they're not feeding in the same place, okay? So that is resource partitioning. Our next, so mutualism. Oh, all of these, okay. So whether it is parasitism, commensalism, or mutualism, living together, these symbioses can have different effects, okay? One species lives in or on another, and that could have a benefit for both species. It could have a benefit for one species and not affect the other, or it could negatively affect one of the species. So in mutualism, species, this is going to be like mycorrhizal fungi on the roots of plants. So mycorrhizal fungi help this plant gather by itself, okay? Now, this does not have any sort of a negative effect on the plant, and it has a beneficial interaction too, with the fungi too. So of both species having this interaction between both of them. Commensalism, one is going to one is not harmed, okay? The trunks of trees, moss, lichen on trunks of trees, The tree does not suffer in any way because the trunk is not photosynthetic anyway. But the moss, the lichen, they are able to reach more sunlight by using that tree trunk. So the moss benefits, the tree it's not negatively affected. Follicles, okay, on your eyelashes, all over your eyebrows, in your actual hair. We have mites. We've got mites all over our body. They feed off of our dead skin, but are they harming us? They're not harming us in any way. Okay, so that's commensalism. Parasitism is when one is negatively affected. So if you have a parasite that is infecting a human, for instance, the parasite benefits and the human is harmed. The host is harmed. Herbivory and predation, you obviously have okay, so herbivory, you have this caterpillar eating a plant. An organism consuming another organism, okay? Now, like this lion consuming what is that? Like, what is it, a wildebeest? I don't know. So some species eat other species for energy, and this is going to be just like parasitism. One is benefiting, the predator is benefiting in both of these situations, and the prey is negatively affected. All right, now communities, you have important to dynamics within that community, okay? And these are going to be called keystone species. So a particular keystone species in some aquatic environments are going to be sea otters. Now, you have these sea urchins that feed on this kelp, okay? Sea urchins feed on kelp, and then the sea otters urchins. So otters feed on kelp. Kelp is eaten by urchins. Urchins are eaten by otters. Now, what happens if you take out the keystone species, which is the eating? They're no longer eating the sea urchins. So what happens to that community of sea urchins? That population of sea urchins, excuse me. Well, in number because they're not being, and that is going to mean increased numbers of sea urchins are going to drastically reduce the of kelp in the system in this community. Now, a food chain, got the series of organisms that successively eat one another. So, and you've got different levels being different trophic levels. So you've got your sunlight. Producers are going to turn the sunlight as well as other reactants into glucose. It's going to be able to make its own energy. Consumed by primary consumers. Secondary consumers are consumed by tertiary consumers. And then all of these, when any of them dies, what happens is that they turn into detritus, all of us. They just are carbon and energy just decaying away, and they are going to be feasted on by decomposers, okay? Then these decomposers, they are going to contribute to the inorganic nutrients that are in environments, okay? So think about in the all right, telling you basically what everything in a system, in an ecosystem consumes. Baleen whales, they are consuming. The krill are consuming decomposers and detritus and phytoplankton and zooplankton. Okay, so you're tracing it backwards to find out what these things are consuming. Now, in a community, you are going to have and different numbers are dynamic. Your measures of diversity are going to be your species richness. How many total species do you versus species evenness in a community? Do you have 5 of every single one of those species, or do you have 5 of one species and 20 of all the rest of your species? So that's species evenness, the proportion of a community that each species occupies. So if we're looking at this diagram, if you look down here, it looks like all except for when you're looking right here. You have low trees and you have low species evenness because you only have one example of each of these 2 species, but a ton of organisms of this kind of tree. Versus up here, you have 5 different species. So species richness is high. Many different examples of your different tree types. Pew, 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 pew. Okay, so species evenness and species richness is high over here. Now, if we blacken out that side, see up here, your species richness is, but just because your species richness is high, this even community structure, richness and high species evenness. Down here, it's very low species evenness with one species. Now, species evenness in both of these examples, but even though you're even, do you have a high species richness in both of them? No. Over here, you've only got 3 species. Over here, you only have 3 species. And over here, you have 5. Even though they're both even, it's dynamic, they're not the same. Okay, guys, you did great. I know that that was fast going through chapter 19. I had to do it for my own health. So that was all of chapter 19. Next time we're going to talk about chapter 18. So I will see you in a few. Bye.